others have not seen. And so it all started with taking a look at some of the raw figures. Basically, we're looking at 2015, 16, 17. You can see the total number of sows, around 600,000. And again, we had a growth during this time period, which is not unusual for our industry during this time. Looking at calls, looking at total sow deaths. If we add those up over a 3-year period, it's over 191,000 sows. So a pretty good chunk that we need to look at. And if you look at it on a death rate percentage basis, it is climbing, 8.6 to about 12. If you want to look at deaths of removals, not too much difference year over year. And then, of course, increases in those death rates. We're going to unpack this in the next few minutes. All the major key slides are in the proceedings, so you can always go back and reference those. So to give you a little bit more information on the database, this was the 13 databases that all went in. Some of them are single farms, some of them are multiple farms. So there's a difference there. Now, to give you a feel if any one database might have been having more or less influence on the outcome, in other words, was there a skew in the deads? This is our attempt to say that. So the red dotted line is percent total females, and then the yellow dotted line is the percent total deads. So yeah, one database has a big problem. Other databases were steady. But I think it answers the question that none of the data is skewed by one of the farms or a multitude of farms. Another look at the chart of deads versus removals. And again, we can see a little slight increase that is occurring over the 3 years. Yes, total born is also increasing. Most of the databases had some increase in total born. I've heard from many of our colleagues in the field that this is one of the risk factors that we need to look at. Possibly it is, and possibly it's a major one, but I'm not sure of that. But you can see we're approaching, except for one database that had some unique instances, we're approaching 15 total born. Pretty good performing farms. And across all of this is a multitude of different feed sources and a multitude of different genetics, which we did not pull out. So if we want to look at reasons for death, we took the liberty of combining some of the reasons. There's just way too many reasons. We have not, probably as an industry, we have not done a really good job of training, defining, so that we can do some further analysis. But you can look at some of these. Lameness, of course, is a big one. That's a given in most of the databases. We are assuming that these sows were euthanized. May or may not be true, but that's the assumption we took. We got some individual health issues by these sows. We're going to unpack this one on the herd health a little bit in a future slide. Enteric, that would be like gastric ulcers, whatever they put down, torsions that might have occurred, things like that. Unknown, that's kind of our miscellaneous field where different things went into that added up to a significant number, but sometimes in themselves was not. So the difference between unknown and other, the farm actually used this category. We did not make any changes to it. So we can see some pretty significant chunks that we need to take a look at. I think this is one of the take-home slides that kind of hit me upside the head as a wet towel. Tremendous loss of sows in the younger parities. Yes, they make up a big part of a sow herd if you want to look at total numbers. But again, at 15, 16, 17, what is going on? We're not in any way going to try to come up with those answers today. At least in this, we may try in future exercises to try to find out more about what's going on here. But you can see it's across all the parities. And we've got a different slide that will illustrate the parities a little bit more clear than sometimes the columns do. But even in parity 2, tremendous difference year over year. So if we look at that parity for some raw numbers, parity 0, 17, parity 1, 20%, parity 2, 15%. I think that's a take-home message. For me, as a practitioner, sow death loss is a very big issue for a farm. So one of my goals today is hopefully allow you, by providing you this information, maybe we can focus down on some key areas that we can help our clients with. This is that herd health issue that I mentioned a little bit earlier. This turned out to be PRRS. For 2017 is elevated in this March-April time period. A little bit different timing than maybe some of the other farms had, but that was pretty significant. And you can see the raw numbers here at the bottom. But I'd also like to point out this little blip, very consistent year over year. That's in July, that's heat. And it's going to drive some of my thinking and some of my comments in the conclusions. So you can see what that March-April time period looked like versus our other pie chart, where PRRS played a very big role. We can't minimize this sometimes. I mean, disease outbreaks are going to occur, but that's what it did in the 1 year in a 2-month period. Big question on a lot of our minds is the prolapse. Again, I'd like to just have you take home the thought that we threw all prolapse types together. Because I suspect we still have an issue with accuracy on some of our records. You know, what's a rectal, what's a vaginal, what's both. So the take home for me is the trend. Again, follow the other trends, and definitely a concern, but maybe in the scope of all sow death loss isn't as big as what I might have thought. This is the other key slide I'd like you to, as a take-home, look at. We're losing anywhere from 1/3 of our sows to 50% of our sows in a 2 to 4 week period in their reproductive life. To me, that's a focal point. That's something that we as an industry could focus in on and take a look at all 3 years. It's the same time period, so this would be from first service, and that's how we count the days across. So it all starts right before farrowing and continues. So again, in this time period of 2 weeks, roughly, it's 1/3 of the sow death loss in this particular database. If I lengthen that out another 2 weeks, it could be nearly 50% of the sow death loss. So what's happening in that sow's life, in her body, at this time? Is there things that we can do differently? I think there is. If you want to look at the raw numbers by parity, again, day 114 through 123 is only the days that I've highlighted. Totals on my left, your right, and then across some of the totals. But this 116 through 119 is huge. And again, it's affecting all parities. So what's happening? What can we do different? This is the slide that I pointed out a little earlier, talking about the different parities, again, by day. And even in these older sows that have made it through many farrowings, many lactations, there's still some challenges going on. You might ask what happens right after weaning. Pretty much the death loss drops to, I don't know if this is a normal rate or not, but it does drop dramatically within 3 days. How many of us have seen a client wean a parity 1, parity 2 animal and walk out there the next morning and she's got a rectal prolapse? Those are the kind of things that are leading up to this sow death loss that we haven't been able to help yet. So to kind of summarize some of this, again, this is a joint effort between myself and PigCHAMP. In our communications, we said, hey, what should we be looking at? So in our analysis of this big database, 600,000 sows, this is what came out of our exercise. So I think it's an area that we definitely need to focus on. It is quite large. It's a big concern. But if I was to have to focus on a client's problem, I'd be looking right around farrowing, and then also in my young gills. What can we be doing differently, either in selection or whatever, that might reduce this kind of mortality? So those are 2 focal points that we can take home. What's going on environmentally? The stresses during summer, and possibly, is there a nutritional aspect that we need to be looking at? Oxidative stress is something that it's kind of a key term for me, not necessarily for everybody, but should we be somehow trying to figure out what's happening with these sows as we're demanding more out of them? Are we feeding them correctly? That's the take-home message. I'm not a nutritionist. I don't expect to be able to answer those questions, but I pose that as a question to us in our industry to see if we can make a difference. Is there a skill set focus that we need to lock down in on with our producers and their farrowing people? Is inducing sows the right thing to do? Are we creating more stress on these animals? I don't know these answers. I'm just bringing you the data today to say, hey, this is what we saw, and I'd like to work further on it. But there is a need, I think, for standardizing reasons of death. And if anybody has done some of this work, at least in a system, that would be great. We just need to make that available to the rest of the industry so that we can help analyze things a little better. With that, I want to thank you for your time, and I greatly look forward to any questions or comments that you have.
In regard to the summer differences, did you look at north versus south in terms of location of the animals?
Geographically, I should have said this earlier on. It's an excellent question. Geographically, this data set goes all the way from western Midwest, northern Midwest, down into the southeast. We did not peel apart that geographic area any differently. But to have that kind of, so my challenge back in an answer or a question or comment would be, that's across all 600,000 sows. It's repeatable every year. So I think we'll find it overall everywhere. Now there'll be variations, I'm sure.
Because we certainly see variation, at least the heat stress between sows in the north and sows in the south. And in terms of heat indexes and some of the other things that we've measured for looking at heat stress, we don't get it as much in Minnesota, for example, as we would in South Carolina.
Yeah, so sustainability of that heat stress, I think, is what you're alluding to, and I think that's a very good point.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see any differences by genetic lines in sow mortality?
So all the major genetics and even some of the minor genetic companies are represented here. And that is an area that we did not have time to peel apart.
How are you classifying the sudden death in your categories? As a noun or sudden death mortality, I mean?
So you're describing that sow that's in the fairing crate, and they walk in the next morning and she's dead.
Exactly.
We're leaving that up to the farm. So it's part of my whole overall comments on training and how we should do that. Now, in the proceedings, in my conclusion, I advocate for more sows to be necropsy. I think that's a key for us practitioners. Either we train the people on the farm to necropsy those animals, take pictures, send us pictures, make a library of things there that we can evaluate as veterinarians. It's called the Necropsy Project. I've done some of them over the years. It's not the definitive, but it helps us narrow it down. Was it enteric? Was it something else?